The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi guys, this is Bill Hartzer, and today is April 4th, 2019. This is the SIA podcast for April 4th, Thursday, April 4th, 2019. And today I'm going to do a little something different, and that I'm going to do some investigative work. And um, basically, I can't really get into too many details about some of the work that I do and what people pay me for. But when it comes to some of it is some investigative work and figuring things out that I can say. And people try and it could be an online reputation management issue. It could be something that for perfect example would be a website. I'll just throw this out there. A website that writes an article that's negative about you or your client. Basically it could be a review site. It could be a blog post that someone has written. But sometimes there are news websites or kind of fake news websites. Not necessarily fake news as in kind of Donald Trump fake news, but news that a site that is disguised as a site. Maybe there was a site that was an expired domain name and it was in Google News already, or someone bought a Google News site and they turned it into their own site and they just pump out all sorts of news on it. And sometimes I've come across cases where somebody doesn't like somebody else, or somebody doesn't like a company, and they'll try and get some negative things out there. So in some cases there are situations where I'm trying to be as generic as possible, because I've come across this, and this has come up because of the fact that I've had to basically in the past few days track down who was a real site owner. And this particular site had written some content that is really negative towards somebody who hired me, I say a client of mine. So they wanted to really, number one, find out who was behind this site, and they also wanted to I don't know what they're going to do with that information, whether they're going to sue them or try and get the site taken down or whatever it is. But anyway, so they have had kind of come across, a need. They really needed to find out who owned one particular site, and for whatever reason, they just could not figure it out. I mean, and they don't know why. Um, and this person, had written a fair amount of negative content, and something that you could probably sue somebody over. So it was worth investigating. And, basically I was hired to investigate it. So I want to show you some ways that you can kind of figure out what, who owns a site. And people try and hide, they will, what they'll do is they will basically, buy a domain name and put it under privacy who is privacy. And then they'll make sure it's on, they'll actually make sure that it is on a, for example, Cloudflare. Okay. They will, they'll do some things they think they're hiding, basically. Okay. And to be honest with you, if they're really trying to hide, it's kind of difficult right now on the web. So if we want to track down somebody, a site owner, and we want to figure out, we want to start looking at a trail of things. And, everybody, you know, everybody kind of, a lot of people, I should say this, a lot of people own more than one website or one domain name. And if you're doing some serious work, especially if you want to track down maybe the owner of a private blog network or something like that, there are ways to figure all this stuff out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some examples, just some generic examples, and of a couple different sites, and go through some ways to start digging in, and kind of finding the trail. So, in fact, and of course, if you have any questions, just feel free to let me know. And of course, afterwards, you can always, if there's anything you've heard me say, I'm happy to answer them. Just get in touch with me. So, with that said, I'm going to close a couple things. Of course, there's always stuff on your desktop that should not be seen, and I think we're good to go. We're pretty clean as far as this particular desktop goes. So I'm going to share my screen, and you're probably already seeing it. Okay, it's a Thursday and it's been crazy. So here's, so you're probably seeing the connected to go to webinar screen, my screen. So that said, a few things. Let's take an example of a site. This is a news site, a legitimate news site about, in the telecom industry. Okay. One of the areas that I'd like to first look into, and obviously, we can do this. So we can go to, I'm going to take another window here, and the first thing you'd want to do is, you can go to whois.domaintools.com / the domain name.com .net, whatever. So in this case, they're actually, this is the Whois record for the site rightreading.com. They've registered it at Safe Names. It has been around since the 1999, and they're using Cloudflare, which is interesting. And I'll show you a few things about that. And that's about as much as you're going to get. And you're going to get the Safe Names thing. So what the next step here would be is actually to most likely go to Safe Names. What happens and look up the Whois directly at that registrar. So I'm going to say, if this is for example, a lot of sites will use GoDaddy. So, if you go to who.godaddy.com, you can and if it's a GoDaddy name, okay, and I'm going to pick a GoDaddy name, and I know that is pretty sure of mine that's at GoDaddy, and you'll notice that if I do the Whois directly at that registrar, you're going to get different information, and as you can see, you get probably the full information. There's only some rare cases where I use privacy on domains. It could be because I own the domain, but it's a domain that could be for a client, something like that. But it's pretty rare, for me. And I think that practically, frankly, and I just for trust and so forth, I have no reason to hide anything, especially in Whois. So I leave mine pretty much open. But that's kind of the first trip. You want to look at the Whois. Okay, in the Whois, you can determine a few things. In the Whois, you want to look at the name servers. Okay, this does use Cloudflare, and so which is fairly common. More and more I'm seeing sites that are using Cloudflare. Sites that want to hide themselves, they'll tend to they actually will they will use Cloudflare fairly often. And now Cloudflare is a registrar, so I could see even more maybe some people hiding. So that's the first area. And then, and the other thing I would want to point out is that if you use domain tools, and I've hit the limit because I've done a ton of searches today and I haven't logged in. But basically, domain tools is the paid version is think about $100 a month. And if you're really serious about digging in and really finding stuff about a domain, then what I do recommend is Domain Tools actually has a Whois history. And if a domain name has been around for a while, a few years, and especially if the domain name was registered before May of 2018, because May of 2018 was when GDPR went into effect. And so what happens now is with a lot of domains, the registrars have basically, because of GDPR, they have limited the amount of information that they're giving out via Whois. And sometimes some registrars actually are putting free privacy on it now. But so what the idea is here is that if it's a domain that you need to know the owner, what you can do is you can look through the domain tools history, of that domain, and you can actually see who, all the changes on that Whois record, and you can go back maybe a year or two, or however, whenever it changed, it actually is saved, and so you can go through that history. So there may be a lot of history there. And you could put two and two together. You can say, if it's using the same name for servers and IP addresses now as it did 6 months ago, and it was valid before, then there's a good chance that it's the same site owner, even though, it was this site owner and then it went under privacy Whois. If the name, servers, and IP address, was the same, then there's a good chance that, you can put two and two together and know that, this is the site owner. So that's Whois. Second part is actually looking at the site. So let's look at this site and let's look at this logo. Okay, I'm going to just save the image. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to save this to my desktop. And stuff over, I'm going to basically right click on the image of where I've saved it, and on the Mac I'm going to hit get info. Okay, and this info here, what I'm looking at is I want to see if there is any EXIF data available. So basically, it looks to me like there's not really many hints here on this this particular image, but sometimes this can give you a clue. So for example, if a site, I will give you an example. This site I know is on I know that this site in particular is on WP Engine. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm saving this image and I'm going to get the info, and I believe so. Here's what I'm looking at. Okay, what I want to look at here in this particular case is that I know this particular site is on Cloudflare. So if I looked up the IP address of it, I would know that it's on Cloudflare. But it turns out that they're on WP Engine. So actually what happens is the image is actually being loaded directly from WP Engine, not through Cloudflare. And so then now I have the address of the site, HTTPS 2 on whatever, wpengine.netdnassl.com. And there you go, that particular site. So I can actually look that up and I can actually see, okay, now we've bypassed Cloudflare and we have an address. We don't have, what we can do here, we can go to dnschecker.org and we can put in that part and look at the A record, okay? And this point, if in this case we do have, the IP address, and we know it's a WP engine, so that can give us some clue, there. We can potentially, so another site that I pay for because of the work I do, but basically there's a thing called public www, and it's public www.com. And in fact, it is a source code search engine. So basically what they've done is, and they give you some of this information here, you can, if they have things like, advertising networks, and if they're using the same Google Analytics ID, okay, if they're using this, they have AdSense on the site. Normally, if someone has AdSense, to be honest with you, they probably have more than one site. Okay, you want to look at, and so you can put in the AdSense ID and find all the sites in that case. So this is essentially like Google, whereas you can do a search, but Google does not really index the code of sites. They index, they index it, but they don't allow you to really search it very well. So what Public WW does, and you can do some basic searches for free, but they don't give you like the full results. So if you pay, it's like $49 a month at the smallest amount. And you can actually get that information. So you could actually, you could search for this in particular, and you could see what they have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of two cases here. Obviously this is just, we know, that site QAconsultants.com, that actually is, okay, that's that's that site, and it knows that that's the WP Engine URL. Let's go back though, and so this is a site. So there's a site which is this site in particular, this OSS News Review, that I've owned for years and years and years, and I use it basically as a sample test site at this point. And I just keep it updated. But so this example, okay, this uses Google Analytics. So we're trying to find, so if I look at the site, okay, there's not a lot of information. There's contact us. Like I said, I don't hide. So, so there is information here. But what if this is a news site or a site that doesn't have any information? It just has a contact form, okay? And if that's the case, then, okay, we don't have information and they're hiding behind, so we don't have any info about this site. Let's start to dig in and see what we can find. And so let's go, and I did view the source code. So if I view this literally with the source code, you can look for, UA hyphen, typically. And so there's the UA, the UA number 277089. Or if they're using Google Tag Manager, I'll look for, I just search for Google and see what they're using. Here's an an AdSense ID that I could put in public www. Here is a UA number. Okay, but let's search for the UA number. And if I just you search for the UA number, okay, and I already had that saved. So the search UA number. There's actually right here. There are 4 sites that are using that account, and this I know that there's probably 40 or 50 or some at least 30 different other sites using that. But there you go. This is, if you see 11, 8, 6, 2, the hyphens, that's the UA, that's the code. And you can start digging around and seeing who owns these websites. Okay, because obviously if they're using the same main account number, you can actually dig in and say, okay, well, if that's the case, then most likely they're associated with the same person or the same entity. And we can assume in this case that whoever owns that site, I just looked who has that UA number, I can assume that this other person, they're associated with. In fact, 3 of those sites I own. The other one was a really old client, and I had set up on probably 10 years ago on this Gun Barrel Ranch years ago, but still uses the same Google Analytics. Now, same thing. Let's look at this light reading. Okay, this particular site, and this was just a competitor. So what I did is actually I again did a search for Google, and I found way to pretty cool is that they're using Google Tag Manager. Okay, so let's get their GTM ID, which is right here. Okay, let's get their GTM tracking ID and say, well, let's dig around and see who owns. See if we can figure out who really owns, because right now the who is for that, I don't have it up anymore, but it was kind of vague. It was just the registrar. So let's look at this, and we can see, and for example, we can see this in particular case. Let's look for that GTM ID, and we can find all of the websites, not all, probably not all of them, but here's a pretty good number of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 sites, 8 other sites that I can start looking at the who is, looking at information. So we know there, if you're using a GTM or Google Tag Manager ID, we know very specifically that this is the same company, this is the same entity, this is the same the person who owns lightreading.com has the same Google Tag Manager and same Google account, okay, as Broadband World News. So those 2 sites are associated with each other, okay. And if you're going to hide, if you're going to hide yourself, and you're going to try and hide behind something, like for example, you have a private blog network, and in that case, why not? You have a private blog network, and you want to, you're linking to your main sites from that network. Well, gee, don't you want? Google knows this information, and they can put, they know that to look up GTM IDs and any other IDs, AdSense IDs, GTM IDs. There's other information. There's IDs for other analytics. There's IDs for stuff like Hotjar and CRMs, tracking and I mean, you can, if there's a Facebook pixel, okay, you can look at that information. You can find that information there. So through public www. So put 2 of these together, start to look and see who owns, okay, Broadband Wireless, Broadband World News. Most likely, these are sites that may not be on the same registrar, so they may actually have different information, but you can assume because it has the same GTM ID that these are all the same people. Okay, next step. Let's take a look and see. We know that site was on Cloudflare, and that was I think it was light reading. Anyway, so let's take that. Let's look at DNS checker. Let's dig around a little bit. Yes, it's on. Let's see. It appears to be on Cloudflare. So these are different DNS records. Okay, the A record basically is the quick explanation. The A record here is essentially what you see in the browser, and the subdomains. What you see in the browser. The other names you would want to look at is the name. You can look at the name servers that are being used, and that's really okay. You confirm it's on Cloudflare. You can also look at the text record. Okay, if we look at the text record, just extra information that may be in there. And so you can actually look and see, for example, that they've put in SPF records for Outlook. I'm not sure what this Mimecast is. I'm not too familiar with that, but they've put those in there. In many cases, there you might also see a Google site verification. It might look something like Google-site-verification equals, and it has a string. You might be able to put 2 and 2 together if you find some domains, look at the text records that might have information there. That if it's has the same site verification ID. It could be related to the same site. Other telltale signs, we can also look at, buildwith.com, and we can see, what other information, what they're using. They're using Omniture. So basically, there might be some tracking there, a tracking code that you could look up in public www. Same thing with Adobe Marketing Cloud. And also the same thing with Facebook. There might be a tracking pixel. They're using Google Analytics and Adobe Marketing Cloud and Omniture. So there's a ton of stuff, and there's uses. There's all sorts of things that that they can be tracked upon. We can also look at, for example, if you start to dig around, if it's a smaller site, they may be linking to a Twitter account. Okay, think about things like, look at the Twitter account, but start to things like, okay, well, who is that account following? Because if the Twitter account is it's a small site, or it's just and doesn't have a lot of followers, most likely when that Twitter account is set up, what the person who owns that account is going to follow their personal account. The personal account is going to follow them back. They're gonna follow, so if they own a site and they create twitter.com/Hartzer. Well, twitter.com/Hartzer for Hartzer.com. Twitter.com/Hartzer is probably going to follow Bill Hartzer, twitter.com/Bill Hartzer, or twitter.com/B Hartzer, because it's the one account is owned by some other people, the same person. So it's logical that those would follow each other. There's connections like that we don't really realize when we're setting stuff up, but those types of things are a way to connect site owners and figure out. I gotta mention Majestic, because frankly, if you look at the backlinks, like I said, you can start to see, paint a picture. Another way, people link sites together that they own, because in their blog networks, or if I link mybillhartzer.com to hartzer.com. I mean, so if you start to dig in the links, you can start to, you may find something. The other way, there's also under the tools here, there is a the network neighborhood checker. So what we can do is we can put in an IP address, and I'm going to put in an IP address. I'm not going to put in. I'm going to put in the sample one I was using before and just check and see. And I'd like to see what on this particular domain, and what what other sites are being hosted. And this is kind of difficult because in this case, it is Cloudflare. So it's going to be pointing to the 104.27.163, and if you notice that they're literally on that class C block of IPs, there are 12,000 domains that they have going through Cloudflare. So this is if it's on Cloudflare, unfortunately that's going to be one kind of a dead end, because frankly, even though that's the case, even all my sites use Cloudflare, I don't see of these 52 sites, just just to tell you that none of these are associated with any sites that I personally own. So there's no way, even though I have the same Cloudflare account, I don't have that there. So there is a way. There is a way to, and there is a site that does allow you to kind of bypass Cloudflare and figure out what server actually is being used by Cloud. The Cloudflare is a filter, and so you can bypass Cloudflare to figure out what server is actually hosting the site. Okay, so that is one option. I don't have a link to that. I have to dig that up. The other thing is, what I'd like to do is, we're getting about out of time. So there is another way. Okay, if you have not used the, if you don't have an account, the public www account, and you don't want to pay the $49 for it, there is a way to actually, use Google Tag Manager, and it's googletagmanager.com/gtm.js !ID equals, and then you put the GTM ID on there. Okay, and it's just the JavaScript code that is actually executed. Okay, and you can if you go to this URL, and all you got to do is take the GTM ID and replace it with whatever it is. If they're using Google Tag Manager, you can actually go in here and you can actually see, because in fact what they have done is this particular site, which is this is the lightreading.com. I'm using it as an example. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have 7 sites using the same GTM ID. Okay, so let's see, partnering1.com. And I don't see partnering1.com on this particular list, but this so you're kind of using more than one more than one site to figure all this out. And not one particular site is going to give you all the details, but you can, in this case though, right now as it stands, these are the sites that have that particular ID, and these are the sites that they have all with this particular Google Tag Manager. And so you can see, okay, there's actually some other sites in here. the broadbandworldnews.com, whitereadingvideo.com. You can start to paint a picture that these are all the sites that this company owns, and they're using the Google, the GTMID. So that's a telltale sign. I have to tell you that I was digging around for a client, and there was some negative press and negative things that have been posted, and this particular person, and I'm not at liberty to say who they are or anything, but this particular person did a really, really good job of hiding. And they're in on the east coast of the United States somewhere, and they even went as far as getting an office suite actually in Houston, and they used that address as their address for the site and some of their other sites that they own in this little network thing. But it come and I dug around, and they hid behind who is privacy. They hid behind links, didn't give anything away. They used Cloudflare. They one of the signs, I was a couple things, I was able to look at the EXIF data on the images on the site, and the EXIF data actually had a WP engine, so I knew it was hosted by WP engine. And then I dug around with that WP engine URL, and putting that WP engine URL in Google, you could find some more things. But it comes down to the fact that this guy went to such great lengths to hide himself. But when it come down to it, he screwed up. And the way he screwed up was he had the same GTM ID with two of the sites. So his site that I have the problem with has a bad content on it, that particular site has the same GTM ID as his personal site. It's like BillHartzer.com, okay? He did all this hiding, and it come down to the GTM ID, and I just looked it up, and there you go. This is the site, has the same GTM ID, and there's two sites that have that GTM ID: his personal site and this other site that he's trying to hide behind. So you can run and you can try and hide yourself, but frankly, if there's ways to figure all this stuff out. So that just like needless to say, that once I found that, I'm probably going to get a bonus from my client just from finding that particular case, and then there was some other information that I found as well. So it's there's some interesting ways to look, and if you start digging around, you can find this stuff, and you can find. And the other thing is that let's look at it on the opposite way. I spent this time digging around trying to find a site owner. Okay. The other thing is I also mentioned, that I even took the time to, take the address and that was on the site, and I found an address and then tried to connect that address with, trying to connect that address, and you put that address in Google, and you basically can also look at, even go on Google Street View and see what's at that address. If there's a business, what I've done in the past, if there's a business at that address or that particular case, or that address, or if it's not the same, I've actually picked up the phone and called the company that I thought was at that address now and said, "Hey, I'm trying to track down so and so who owns this, or the owner of this particular domain name, and Do you know anything about this? And in, they might, you might know about the former owner. They might know that people are using, might say it that people are just using their address as, as and it's all fake. It's just hard to say. So at this point, uh, I think that's all I have for now. I don't have any questions in audience questions, so I'm going to call it a day because I've probably gone over about 10 minutes, and so trying to look and see if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else, but was the Google Tag Manager is used so much that this is a really great way to find out. And then also there's so much you can do by using Public WW's source code search engine. So that said, uh, today has been the SIA podcast for Thursday, April 4th, 2019. We've kind of focused today on trying to dig in and find a site owner and look at some different ways to find out, who is connected with other websites and so forth. So at this point, I appreciate talking to you today. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me at Hartzer.com, BillHartzer.com, Twitter.com/bhartzer, and you can also Skype me as well. Again, SIA podcast for April 4th, 2019. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.